Man, my video game controller is dusty because I have not played games in forever. So, being a video game tester, is it actually the dream job that people think it is? Tony Sticks here from TonySticks.com, and I have something really interesting to talk about. Something pretty eye-opening because I actually worked as a game tester for some time, and there was a lot of good to it, there was a lot of bad to it, and there was a lot of ugly to it. So whether you're interested on what it's like to be a video game tester or you would like to be a video game tester sometime in the future, hopefully this video is going to be helpful and insightful to you. So how do you become a video game tester? Well, I saw a random job on a job board. This wasn't the direction I was trying to take my career, but being a video game tester sounded fun. So I applied and I just to see what happened. To my surprise, I did get contacted and I did get brought in for an interview. But before I interview to any job, I like to do a ton of research of the company and of what the position is like. So I kind of have a collection of knowledge that I could use during the interview to hopefully tailor it towards success and actually get hired on. So I started doing a bunch of research on what it's like to be a video game tester and what do you do. And I came across a lot of horror stories of people saying that they don't pay you enough, they overwork you, and they don't treat you right because being a video game tester, you're at the bottom of the video game chain corporate ladder thing. So after hearing about those horror stories, I was actually pretty hesitant about going in and doing the interview. But what's the worst that could happen? If I don't like it, I quit. And if I really like it, cool, I get a job playing video games in the video game industry. How cool is that? The interview was actually pretty straightforward. I actually went ahead and wrote down all the questions that they asked. So here's some of the questions. What types of games do you play? What is your favorite video game? Give an example of a bug you found in a video game. What's your biggest accomplishment? Generic interview question. Do you have any experience working with big databases? They asked this question because they do use a big database to kind of collect and keep track of all the bugs they find. And the last question, why would you be good at video game testing? My simple answer was, I'm good at logic puzzles and breaking things. They were quite surprised when I answered that, because isn't that pretty much what a video game tester does? You go in, you break things, you find bugs, and you report them. But there's actually quite a in-depth process to that. So what does a video game tester do exactly? Well, you get a computer and you get a video game console, an assigned video game console. Could be anything. Could be a PC, could be a Nintendo Switch, could be an Xbox or a PlayStation or another PC. Sometimes you are assigned a specific level or an area of the game that you need to explore and test, and sometimes you go, have free reign, explore the entire game and try to break as many things as you can. When you find a bug or break something, there's quite a in-depth reporting process that you have to do. The first thing you have to do is test the bug multiple times to make sure that it was a one-off situation and that you can actually consistently reoccur that bug. The next thing you have to do is get evidence of the bug and store it into the database. This could be through a couple things. You can take screenshots, you can clip, make videos, and if it was a crash, you just take the crash files and move them over to the PC. In the database, you have to log a very detailed report on what the bug is, how many times you were able to replicate the bug, and a detailed report on how to replicate the bug. That is a majority of what you do when you're a game tester, is you find bugs and you log them into a database. Every now and again, the developers will send over the newest version of that video game, which you would have to install to your console and sit around and wait and do nothing during that time. But once that new version is installed, what you could do is go to your old bugs that you made or other people's old bugs that they found and retest those bugs to see if the newest game patch actually fixed those bugs. Also, there was like stress test days where we would stress test the servers. Everybody in the office, everybody in the building would log on and try to basically crash the servers. And those days pretty much consisted of go play multiplayer and have fun with other people in the office, which ties into the good, the bad, and the ugly section of this video. So the good thing about being a video game tester is it's fun. You test, play test video games. Not gonna lie, some days I was not feeling like I wanted to find bugs and I just came in and said, I'm just gonna play and relax. And some days when I did that were the days when I found the most amount of bugs in the video game. So basically getting paid to play video games is fantastic. Some other great things about being a video game tester is you would get a free copy of the game when it released. You would also get your name into the credits as well, except I didn't get into the credits because I got hired right when the developer finished entering the credits. I'm still quite bummed about that. But you would get a free copy of the video game you worked on, as well as any other games that were released during the same time by that development team. You would, hey, free video games. Thank you for working for our company. That was great. And if it wasn't free video games, you would be getting a employee discount, a steep employee discount. At least my particular company, they had steep discounts on old video games and discounts on merchandise, which is pretty cool. Also, there was like no dress code, you know, just don't wear anything too revealing and no open-toed shoes. So literally waking up, putting on whatever I had in my closet and going to play video games, that was a lot of fun. And then when I'd get to the office, there was unlimited coffee and soda, which is something I think that company was doing on purpose to try to keep all their testers energized throughout the day. And the last good thing about being a video game tester is you work with other gamers. So you guys have a lot to talk about. It's a fun environment. When you're game testing the multiplayer service, there's trash talking going around the office. If you're into that, that could be a really fun experience. Now, all things aside, there were some bad things about being a video game tester. One thing that's really important is pay. You don't get paid a lot to be a video game tester. In fact, most companies actually pay minimum wage to be a video game tester, and the particular company I worked on, they paid slightly above minimum wage, and during the orientation process, they even said, you should be thankful that we're not paying you minimum wage. You should be thankful that we're paying you just above because all the other companies will be paying you minimum wage. But even with the amount they were paying, it wasn't meeting the standards of what a comfortable living wage would be where I live. So being a video game tester can be fun, but you're not really getting paid enough to have a fantastic form of living. Except that's when the overtime comes in. That's when people say, that's when it's worth it to be a video game tester. That's what they told us. You worked for the overtime, and the overtime is what makes you the big bucks. Except there's a lot of overtime. There's too much overtime. In fact, they overwork you. But some people really enjoyed that. When you're nearing a video game release, 1 to 2 months coming up to the release, they start making you work a lot. 12-hour days, 6 days a week, about maybe 80 hours a week. It's a lot. It's stressful. You kind of lose your social life. And that was really hard for me because I really value my free time. I value family time, and I value time to work on fun, creative things like making YouTube videos. But I will admit I did meet some video game testers who loved their job, said this was the dream job, that they wouldn't change anything in the world, and they lived comfortably well below their means. And if you can do that, great. Go work your dream job that doesn't pay a lot and figure out what you want to do for your living situation. And if that's what makes you happy, then do that, like some people were doing, because happiness is priceless. If you like being a video game tester, which I did at first, but the bad stuff was actually starting to get to me, you're basically sitting at a desk all day. And if you're playing video games 12 hours a day, 6 days a week, you're in a stationary position with your controller, you know. Sometimes you have nice seats and you can like kick back a little bit, but you can really only do that so much before your body starts aching. I would get home from being a video game tester, and the only thing I wanted to do was move. I wanted to run. I wanted to lift weights. I wanted to work out because I couldn't stand not moving. Another thing that goes hand in hand with sitting all the time is you're staring at a screen. Not only are you staring at a screen, you're also playing the same video game, the same genre over and over and over, the same level over and over. And if you find enjoyment in that and you think that can be fun, good for you. But I was getting very sick of video games. And I know something that I've dabbled throughout my entire life is video game addiction and beating video game addiction and prioritizing myself first. But playing the same video game over and over kind of really ingrained it into my head that I never want to look at another video game ever again. For some people I worked with, video games were their life. So you would test a video game for 12 hours and you would go home and play more video games and then come back to work and talk about the video games you played at home. Great, except can't believe I'm saying this, but it was too much for me. You know, like there's this whole tactic of how to get somebody to quit smoking cigarettes is you have them smoke a bunch of cigarettes and then they never want to smoke another cigarette again. That was what happened to me. I played so much video games that I just never wanted to play a video game ever again. Now here's the last bad thing before we move on to the ugly truth about being a video game tester. Because you're working on a video game that hasn't yet been released, the video game companies are typically very strict on making sure you don't release anything. I've heard some stories of people walking through metal detectors to make sure they don't have anything in them when they bring them into the office. My company, you have a locker, it's an honor system, you put your phone into the locker and you go into the office. And typically the work day went 4 hours, lunch break, 4 hours, lunch break, 4 hours, if it was those 12-hour days. And on those breaks is when you would go check your phone. Some people loved not having their phone on them for periods of 4 hours. It was a great experience for them. Some people, that was really hard. They really needed their phone on them and they would sneak their phones into the office. Not that they were gonna leak any information on the video game they were testing, but I don't know, maybe they had their own reasons. But I saw plenty of times people getting caught bringing their phone into the office and they were fired on the spot. Yeah, just for bringing your phone into the section where you test video games, you're fired on the spot. Which starts to tie into the ugly part about being a video game tester. You can get pretty much fired on the spot, depending on how they hire you, whether it is through a contract or if you live in a state where they can fire you immediately for no reason whatsoever at all. Typically, video game companies cover their own butts and make sure they can do that. So here's the thing about getting fired on the spot. This particular video game company I worked at had a public listing that they would post every week on how many bugs a person found. So the entire office can take a look at this sheet of paper and you would see who's at the bottom of the list and not finding bugs and who's at the top of the list and finding a lot of bugs. It was a competition. And it was a pretty fierce competition because it was ingrained to our heads that you're hired on as a temporary employee. And if you're at the top of the list and you're finding a lot of bugs, they'll hire you on, or they promise to hire you on as a full-time employee or an actual employee with the company. And if you're at the bottom of the list, you would be getting fired. Here's what was really bad about that situation. During orientation and training to be a video game tester, it was ingrained in our heads that when we find a bug, we need to test it multiple times, which nobody actually did, because why test a bug multiple times when you can move on to testing or finding other ones? And then why spend a bunch of time writing a detailed report about the bug when you can write a crappy report and start finding other bugs? This was quite an ethical dilemma for me because I really take pride in making good quality work. And in actuality, what it's like to be a video game tester, it's quantity over quality. I once found a really complicated bug that took me a long time to enter into the database, and somebody entered it 5 minutes before me into the database. And it was a really bad report of the bug. But they got credit for the bug, and I got in trouble for entering what is a duplicate bug. You're supposed to search in the database before you enter a bug to see if somebody entered that bug before. I did, it wasn't there. But when I was writing the report, somebody beat me to it. I was shocked that that was okay. And it was so bad that I actually saw video game testers, they got assigned, hey, go check these bugs to see if they're still there. They would just check mark them as they were fixed. They didn't even go into the video game and see if the bug was still there. Like, how do you do that? That's not okay. So I asked one of the employees who I got along with really well, like, why do people do that? And his response was basically, it's just part of the game. You got to keep those numbers up, so you got to do what you got to do. What? You ever wonder why a video game gets released on release day and has a bunch of bugs? It's because the game testers aren't actually testing the bugs. And it's not the game testers' faults. It is the company's fault for being like, hey, you need to get those numbers up or else we're gonna fire you. So of course the game testers aren't incentivized to take time and pride into finding bugs. It's all about a numbers game. That was quite an ethical dilemma. And when I came to that conclusion, I stopped really enjoying being a video game tester because I knew I was never gonna get those numbers up that way because that's not the type of person that I am. So let's get into another ugly thing that caught my eye. On the day of release, there were video game testers who went into the database and found really bad bugs that they would use to their own advantage at home on the day of release. So you ever wonder why you're playing a multiplayer game on the day of release and suddenly you see a guy who's maximum level with the best gear and zipping around killing everybody unfair like? Well, maybe they're a game tester who have access to all the current bugs that allowed him to exploit multiplayer. Why wouldn't they? They have access to the database. They have an unfair advantage because none of that stuff's been posted anywhere on the internet. It baffles me that people do that, but I guess that's the dark side of being a video game tester. And the last ugly thing is the big layoffs. And it's bound to happen. They hire you on for a X amount of time through a temp contract or whatever reason, and you're pretty much there to test the game up to release. Yes, you're promised that they might hire you as a full-time permanent employee if you're a good tester, but even the people that work their butt off, I saw get laid off. And it happens the Friday after the game gets released because once the game gets released, there's pretty much nothing you need to do. You don't have to test the game for bugs because pretty much the rest of the world is testing the game for bugs. So the video game company does what it has to do, of course, and lay you off. It could be before your actual layoff date or expiration date, whatever it is, could be, because they want to lay you off whenever is most beneficial to them. So keep that in mind. If you're going to be a video game tester, you can get pretty much laid off at any time. Overall, it was quite a interesting and eye-opening experience for me. I'm glad I experienced it. I don't think I would ever want to do that again, but it feels good knowing that you worked on something bigger than yourself and you look back and think, yeah, I helped make that video game. Sure, my name didn't make it into the credits because they hired me on late, but I know that I helped make that game great. So anyway, that was my experience being a video game tester. If this has been insightful or helpful in some way, please go ahead and leave a like button. It is super helpful. Do you like my little like button sign? And if you have any experience being a video game tester, please share it down below in the comment section. Or if you have any questions, leave them below because I will be reading them and I will be answering them as best as I can. And until then, this has been Tony Sticks, and may you have a fantastic day. Smash that like button. Woo!